At 3:42 on a gray Tuesday afternoon, 23 minutes before the marriage desk at the Cook County Courthouse closed, my fiancé called me by accident. I knew it was an accident because Peter did not say hello. He was laughing. Behind his laughter came the soft clink of glassware and a woman's voice I had heard at dinners, project meetings, and once through the bathroom door of my own home. "You really left a bride at the courthouse for me?" Celia Ross asked. There was a smile in her voice. Not surprise, not guilt, possession. Peter lowered his voice, but the phone caught every word. "Nora will wait. That's what she does." For a moment, I did exactly that. I sat on a wooden bench outside marriage court, wearing the pearl gray suit my daughter had helped me choose over a video call. My bouquet of white tulips rested beside me. The stems were wrapped in a blue ribbon cut from my mother's wedding dress. In my handbag were 2 copies of our marriage license, the little velvet box holding Peter's grandfather's ring, and a folded card on which I had written the vows I was too embarrassed to say in front of a large wedding crowd. Around me, the courthouse continued with the indifferent rhythm of a building that had witnessed thousands of promises. A young couple in matching denim jackets posed beneath a brass sign. A man with silver hair adjusted his wife's veil while their grown children applauded. Somewhere behind the double doors, a clerk called the next names. "Bennett and Caldwell?" I did not answer. "On the phone," Celia said. "She has waited twice already. Even you can't believe she'll give you a 4th chance." Peter made a sound I had once mistaken for confidence. "She won't walk away this close to the wedding. The deposits are paid, her family is flying in, and she knows what the Braddock Project means to me. After we're married, I'll explain the guarantee. She'll be upset, but she'll sign." The guarantee. The word landed differently from the rest. An affair could break my heart. A guarantee could take my home, my retirement, and the preservation studio I had spent 26 years building. "And us?" Celia asked. "After the loan closes, everything gets easier." There was another clink, then a silence intimate enough to tell me what they were doing. I ended the call before I had to hear it. My hands were steady. That frightened me more than tears would have. I had loved Peter Caldwell for 4 years. I had excused him for 3 missed ceremonies, 2 forgotten birthdays, and more canceled dinners than I could count. I had told myself that a man carrying a troubled adult son, an ambitious company, and a $40 million redevelopment project was bound to be pulled in many directions. What I had never admitted was that every direction led away from me. "Miss Bennett?" The clerk standing before me was a small woman with kind brown eyes and an identification badge that read Maria Alvarez. I had spoken to her at our second failed appointment. She recognized me. The recognition brought a flicker of sadness to her face before she arranged it into professional calm. "We're going to close the courtroom in a few minutes," she said. "Would you like me to call your fiancé again?" My phone buzzed. Peter had finally sent a text. "Celia fainted at the lender meeting. I'm at Northwestern with her. I am so sorry. Please don't leave. We'll fix this." I read it twice, not because I believed it, but because I wanted to remember the exact shape of his lie. Then I looked at Maria. "No," I said. "I would like to withdraw our application." She did not ask whether I was sure. Women her age knew that certainty rarely arrived with fanfare. Sometimes it arrived as a quiet voice after years of noise. She led me to the counter and gave me a form. I wrote, "Eleanor Grace Bennett," in the space marked applicant. Under reason for withdrawal, I printed, "Plans changed." That was true, although not complete. Maria stamped the form and separated the copies. "You keep this one." "Thank you." She touched the tulips. "Would you like some water for those?" I looked at the bouquet my sister had ordered from Portland, Maine, because she could not bear the thought of me carrying courthouse flowers from a grocery store. "No," I said. "They've waited long enough, too." Outside, rain polished the sidewalks around Daly Plaza. I stood beneath the courthouse, awning, while people opened umbrellas and hurried toward trains. My phone began ringing. "Peter." I declined the call. He called again. I turned the phone off. Across the street, reflected in a dark window, I saw a woman of 54 with rain curling the ends of her brown hair. She looked dignified, well-dressed, and completely alone. For years, I had feared that last part of the description. That afternoon, it looked less like a sentence and more like a doorway. I walked 3 blocks to the offices of Levin, Cho, and Hart. My oldest friend, Margot Levin, was a family law attorney who had drafted the property agreement Peter kept postponing. Her assistant took one look at my suit and flowers and ushered me in without asking whether I had an appointment. Margot rose from behind her desk. "Where is Peter?" I placed my phone on her desk, turned it on, and played the accidental voicemail that had been saved when the call disconnected. When it ended, Margot's face had lost all color. "What guarantee?" she asked. "I don't know." She locked her office door. "Then before you cancel a caterer, before you confront him, and before you go home, we're going to find out." I looked down at my ring. For the first time that day, my hand shook. "I am going to cancel the caterer," I said, "and the venue, and every other part of the wedding." Margot came around the desk and took both my hands in hers. "Good," she said. "But first we protect the woman who finally stopped waiting." That was the moment my wedding ended. It was also the moment the rest of my life began. Margot listened to the voicemail 3 times. The first time, she listened as my friend. The second time, she listened as an attorney. The third time, she wrote down every exact phrase Peter had used. "The deposits are paid," she read. "Her family is flying in. She knows what the Braddock project means to me. After we're married, I'll explain the guarantee." She set down her pen. "Has he ever asked you to guarantee a business loan?" "No." "Has he asked you to refinance the house?" "He mentioned that rates might improve next year. Nothing formal." "Has anyone from his bank sent you documents through an electronic signature service?" I started to say no, then remembered an email from 3 weeks earlier. Peter had been sitting at our kitchen island, opening a bottle of wine while I finished reviewing window specifications for the Braddock house. He asked whether I had signed the updated project consulting acknowledgement. "Just housekeeping," he had said. "The lender wants everybody's roles documented." The link had expired by the time I opened it the next morning. Peter told me not to worry. Celia's assistant would resend it. She never did. I told Margot. "Forward me the email," she said. I searched my inbox. The message came from a generic project portal, but the subject line was still there. Braddock House. Consultant consent and related party disclosure. Margot read it, then looked at me over the top of her glasses. "Related party means you. If you married Peter while serving as the preservation architect on his project, the lender would need to know. This is not automatically sinister. Hiding the actual document is..." Peter said it was a role acknowledgement. "Peter has said many things. Tonight we work from records." She called her husband, told him she would be late, and ordered soup from the deli downstairs. I called my office manager, Priya Shah, and asked her to send me the Braddock contract, all amendments, and the most recent drawing log. "Are you all right?" Priya asked. I glanced at the tulips lying across Margot's conference table. "No, but I am thinking clearly." "That can be more useful. I'll send everything." While we waited, I studied the framed photographs in Margot's office. We had met at Northwestern when I was 19 and she was 20. In one photograph, we stood together at my first wedding, 2 young women with glossy hair and faith in the permanence of things. My marriage to David Bennett lasted 21 years. It did not end with betrayal. It ended slowly, after too much silence and too many years of wanting different lives. We divided our property fairly, raised our daughter Tess without using her as a weapon, and learned to speak kindly again. After the divorce, I promised myself that if I ever married again, I would do it with open eyes. I had not realized open eyes could still choose not to see. Peter entered my life at a Preservation Commission hearing. He was presenting a plan to transform the abandoned Braddock bathhouse near Montrose Harbor into a hotel, restaurant, and public arts space. The original proposal was beautiful from 20 feet away and careless up close. It removed 2 load-bearing masonry walls, replaced historically significant windows with black aluminum, and buried the public walkway behind a private valet lane. I spoke against it. After the hearing, Peter found me in the corridor. "You destroyed 6 months of work in 7 minutes," he said. "The building is 98 years old. It deserved 7 minutes." Then he smiled. It was a remarkable smile. Not because Peter was the handsomest man I had known, but because he could make attention feel like sunlight. "Have coffee with me," he said. "Tell me how to do it right." Coffee became dinner. Dinner became a consulting contract. The contract became long Saturday walks through old Chicago buildings, his hand warm at the small of my back. He listened when I talked about brick, light, and the moral responsibility of restoring places ordinary people loved. He remembered that my mother had sung in a church choir, and that I took my coffee without sugar. When he proposed beside the frozen lake 2 winters later, I believed I had found the rare man who admired both my tenderness and my mind. Priya's files arrived at 5:11. Margot opened the original agreement first. My firm, Bennett Preservation Studio, retained ownership of all plans, reports, drawings, and specifications until paid in full. The Braddock Company had a limited license to use them only for the approved project and only while my firm remained consultant of record. Any alteration required my written approval. "Are you paid in full?" Margot asked. "Through March. April is overdue." "How overdue?" 17 days. Peter said the lender draw was delayed. Margot made another note. The drawing log showed that 3 revised plan sets had been uploaded the previous Friday. Each bore my professional seal. I had not issued them. My stomach tightened. I opened the first set. Someone had reduced the fire-rated corridor around the ballroom kitchen. In the second, restored wood windows had been replaced with a cheaper composite product that did not meet the commission approval. The third removed an accessible entrance ramp and substituted a lift that the city had rejected months ago. At the bottom right of every page was my seal and a digital image of my signature. "Those aren't mine," I said. Margot leaned closer. "The signature? The revisions? The upload? Any of it? Who has access to your seal?" "Priya and I. It is stored on our secured server. Peter's team receives flattened PDFs, never the seal file." I called Priya again. She was still at the office. "Check the server log for my seal," I said. "Do not email anyone at Caldwell Urban. Do not call Peter. Just tell me whether our file was accessed." She was quiet for several minutes. I heard keys clicking. "No access since February 28th, she said. "Nora, the revised title blocks say they were issued from your studio on May 10th. "I know. Should I call our insurance carrier?" "First thing tomorrow. Lock the project folder and preserve the audit logs." When I ended the call, Margot folded her arms. "You came here thinking you had discovered an affair," she said. "You may also have discovered fraud." Outside her window, the office towers began to glow against the rainy evening. I thought about Peter telling Celia everything would become easier after the loan closed. Easier for them. Not for the firefighters who might enter a corridor designed to a standard I had never approved. Not for a wheelchair user arriving at a lift the city had already found inadequate. Not for the woman whose name had been copied onto the corner of every page. I slid the engagement ring from my finger and placed it beside the tulips. "Tell me what we do next." Margot did. By 7 o'clock, we had preserved the voicemail, downloaded the project records, and drafted notices to my insurer and the city. We did not send anything yet. We needed to know whether the files had reached the lender or permitting office, and whether Peter had used my supposed consent anywhere else. At 7:15, he texted again. "Celia is stable. Where are you? Please answer. I know you're hurt." At 7:17, this was not my choice. That sentence nearly made me laugh. Peter had built his life from choices and then described each consequence as weather. I typed a response. "I left the courthouse. I need space. Do not come to my office tonight." I did not mention the voicemail. I did not mention the drawings. I needed him to believe I knew only what he expected a patient woman to know, that he had disappointed me again. He answered immediately. I love you. We will fix this. I showed Margot. He keeps using we, she said. Peter has always liked shared responsibility. Margot closed the project file. Then, for once, let him carry his own. Canceling a wedding is a strange form of archaeology. You uncover every hope one invoice at a time. At 8 the next morning, I called the glass house at Lincoln Park, where 112 guests were scheduled to gather 6 weeks later. The coordinator, a warm young man named Luis, knew me well. Peter had attended only 2 of our 7 planning meetings, so Luis and I had chosen the menu, the linens, the music, and the exact hour when the west windows would catch the evening light. Miss Bennett, he said, I saw your name on my schedule and assumed we were discussing the final tasting. We're not. I need to cancel the wedding. There was a professional pause. May I ask whether you want to postpone? No. Cancel. He reviewed the contract. Because the venue had a waiting list for summer Saturdays, I would lose only the initial booking fee if they filled the date. The caterer would retain 15%. The florist had not ordered the imported flowers yet. The quartet required 1 week's notice. I had paid every deposit from my own account. Peter's contribution was supposed to come after the Braddock loan closed. That fact had once seemed like bad timing. In the hard white light of morning, it looked like evidence. Would you like me to contact the other vendors? Luis asked. Please. Tell them the cancellation is final and that only I may authorize any change. I understand. Luis? Yes? Thank you for never making me feel foolish when I came to those appointments alone. His voice softened. You did not come alone. You came prepared. There is a difference. I wrote that sentence on a yellow pad. By 10, the wedding website was offline. By 11, hotel blocks were released. At noon, I called my sister June in Portland. June answered on the first ring. How was the courthouse? I could not speak. She waited. Unlike Peter, June knew waiting could be an act of love when it did not demand that another person disappear. He didn't come, I said. Oh, Nora. He was with Celia. I heard them. June's breath caught. She had distrusted Celia from their first meeting, though she had been too kind to say more than, that woman behaves as if she has already chosen where she will sit at your dinner table. I told her about the call. I did not yet tell her about the altered plans. Margot wanted the circle of knowledge kept small. Come here, June said. Tonight, if you can. I have a company and a house. You also have a bedroom in my house, a key you've never used, and a job offer on your desk from the Maine Heritage Trust. 6 months earlier, the trust had invited me to become director of preservation programs. The position paid less than my Chicago income, but offered something I had not allowed myself to want. A chance to teach, to work on libraries and town halls instead of another luxury development, and to live near June. I had declined because Peter said he could not relocate while the Braddock project was underway. They filled it, I said. No, they didn't. I had lunch with Susan Caldwell last week. Their second candidate withdrew, and she said the board still hopes you'll reconsider. I closed my eyes. The job had been waiting. Peter had not. I can't leave tonight, I said. But I may leave soon. After we hung up, I called Susan. The conversation lasted 22 minutes. She did not ask why I had changed my mind. She asked whether I could be in Portland by July 1st. Yes, I said before fear could speak. Then the position is yours, subject to the same terms. I will send the letter today. My office occupied the second floor of a brick building in Ravenswood. I had founded Bennett Preservation Studio at 28, with a drafting table, 1 borrowed computer, and a belief that good work would eventually introduce itself. Over the years, it had grown to 6 employees. Priya had been with me for 12 of them. I could not close it because my personal life had collapsed. I called everyone into the conference room at 2. I have accepted a position in Maine, I told them. It begins July 1st. That does not mean this studio ends. Priya, if you still want the partnership we've discussed, I would like you to take a controlling interest and lead the Chicago work. I will retain a minority share for 1 year and transition my projects responsibly. Priya stared at me. You're serious? Very. What about the wedding? There will be no wedding. No one asked for details. The compassion on their faces told me how much they had noticed without saying. We talked for an hour about clients, licenses, payroll, and the Braddock project. I explained only that unauthorized drawings had been issued under my name, and that no one was to communicate with Peter's company without copying our attorney and insurer. At 3:12, the office door opened. Peter walked in carrying my courthouse bouquet. The tulips were bent from the night without water. He had found them in Margot's office after I left. He must have persuaded her receptionist to hand them over before Margot arrived that morning. That was Peter's gift. He could make intrusion look like devotion. Nora, he said. Every head in the conference room turned. He wore the navy suit he had bought for our ceremony. His silver hair was damp from the rain. In his other hand was a white box from my favorite bakery. Can we speak privately? I led him into my office but left the door open. I asked you not to come here. You asked me not to come last night. His smile was tired and patient, as though I were the one making conversation difficult. I gave you space. Less than a day. We were supposed to be married yesterday. Forgive me for not treating this like a minor disagreement. He placed the tulips on my desk. Several petals fell beside the box. Celia is fine, he said. Dehydration and stress. The lender meeting was brutal. She stood up and collapsed. I couldn't leave her on the floor. I pictured the champagne glass I had heard. Which hospital? He blinked. What? Your text said Northwestern. Which building? Did they take her to emergency? Observation? Emergency. I don't know which unit. You know how chaotic hospitals are. I had spent 9 years overseeing preservation work at Northwestern's oldest buildings. Peter knew I knew the campus almost as well as he did. What time was she discharged? I watched him make the calculation. Around 6. Nora, why are you interrogating me? Because for the 3rd time, I was sitting at the courthouse while you were somewhere else. He took a step closer. The first time, my son was hurt. The second, 80 people would have lost their jobs if I had not fixed the bridge financing. Yesterday, a woman collapsed in front of me. Which choice would you have made? There it was, his favorite trick. He built a false emergency, placed himself at its noble center, and asked me to condemn compassion itself. I would have told the truth, I said. Something shifted behind his eyes. What does that mean? I almost told him about the voicemail. Anger pressed against my ribs, wanting air. But Margot's warning returned. Let him believe you know less until we know what he has done with your name. It means the wedding is canceled. His face went still. The courthouse appointment? The June wedding. Everything. You canceled our wedding because I helped someone during a medical emergency? I canceled it because there will not be a 4th appointment. He looked past me, perhaps noticing the empty space where our venue plan had hung. Then he laughed once, without humor. You are hurt. I understand. But you do not make a decision this large in one angry morning. I just did. Your family has tickets. My board is attending. The Tribune may cover the project announcement at the reception. Not our marriage. The project announcement. Even then, Peter could not hear himself. The venue will contact you, I said. Please leave. He studied me with an expression I would later recognize as the first moment he understood that his usual map of me was wrong. We'll talk at home, he said. No. You will collect what you need while I am there, and then you will stay at your condo. I rented that condo. Then stay at a hotel. He lowered his voice. Do you know what pulling this wedding will do to the Braddock closing? The question escaped before he could stop it. I held his gaze. No, Peter. Why don't you tell me? Peter recovered quickly. Nothing, he said. It will do nothing to the closing. I meant the investors expect stability. They know you are part of the preservation team, and they know we're engaged. A sudden cancellation invites gossip. Then tell them we ended our engagement. That is not gossip. It is information. We have not ended anything. I have. He reached for my hand. I stepped back. That small movement hurt him more than shouting would have. Peter depended on touch when language failed. A palm against my cheek, an arm around my waist, fingers closing over mine. Each gesture reminded me of the man I had loved and invited me to abandon whatever question had made him uncomfortable. "Nora," he said, "I know I have failed you. I know 3 times sounds unforgivable when you line it up like an accusation. But life is not a courtroom exhibit. Adam's accident was real. The financing crisis was real. Celia's collapse was real. Why did you need 3 courthouse ceremonies? Because you kept insisting on one before the formal wedding. We needed a legal marriage before your June lender deadline. You were the one who said that." He looked toward the open door. Priya was visible at the conference table, pretending to review a file. "Close the door," he said. "It stays open. You are humiliating me in front of your staff. You came to my office after I told you not to." His mouth tightened. It was a small expression, but I knew it. I had seen it when a contractor challenged him, when a server brought the wrong wine, when Adam asked for money after promising he would not. Peter's warmth was generous only while the world followed his preferred arrangement. "I will collect a bag tonight," he said. "Then we are taking 48 hours to calm down. You will not make any public announcement. You will not contact the Braddock lender. And you will certainly not withdraw from the project over a personal dispute. My professional decisions are not yours to make. They affect hundreds of people. So did the drawings issued under my seal last Friday." He stopped breathing for one beat. There was my answer. I had not planned to reveal that I knew. But the look on his face was worth the loss of surprise. Not guilt, exactly. Recognition. "What drawings?" he asked. "The May 10th revisions. Celia said your office approved those. Celia is not an architect. Neither am I. That is why we rely on teams. My team did not issue them. Someone copied my seal and signature onto plans I rejected." He ran a hand over his hair. "This is a document control mistake. Nothing more. Then it will be easy to correct. Do not overreact. The lender is reviewing the final package today. If you send some dramatic notice, you could put the entire loan at risk over a clerical error. A reduced fire corridor is not clerical. The code consultant approved it. Then the code consultant can seal it." I saw irritation flash again. "You have always said the building comes before ego. My seal is not my ego. It is my legal responsibility." He leaned closer, speaking so softly that Priya could not hear. "Do not punish the project because you are angry with me." I thought of Celia asking about us, and Peter promising that things would become easier after the loan closed. I thought of him explaining a guarantee after we were married, as though marriage were a hallway through which he could carry documents I would reject at the front door. "Leave," I said. "Nora. If you are still here in 30 seconds, Priya will call building security." Peter looked at Priya. She met his gaze without blinking and lifted her phone. He picked up the bakery box. "I bought lemon cake," he said, as though this detail proved he loved me. "Take it to Celia." His face changed. Only slightly. Enough. Then he walked out. I closed my office door after him and leaned against it. Priya waited several seconds before knocking. "Do you need me to call Margot?" "She is already on her way." "Do you need me to say anything?" "Not yet." She looked at the bent tulips. "Would you like me to throw those out?" "Please." When she lifted them, the blue ribbon slipped loose. I took it before she carried the flowers away. Margot arrived with a forensic technology consultant named Isaac Cho. By 4, he had begun a structured review of our project server and email accounts. We found no breach. The likely source was a preliminary title block Peter's staff had received 18 months earlier, before I tightened our file controls. Someone had lifted the seal and signature image from that PDF and placed them on the new drawings. At 5:30, my insurer instructed me to notify the Department of Buildings, the Preservation Commission, the project owner, and the lender that the May 10th set was unauthorized. Margot advised me to send the notice immediately. "It will stop the closing," I said. "It may pause the closing," she corrected. "Peter can submit legitimate drawings." Not by Friday. Whose deadline is Friday? His. Margot waited. I understood. For 4 years, urgency had been Peter's most effective tool. His deadlines became emergencies. His emergencies became my obligations. He had asked me to review plans at midnight, call commissioners during family dinners, and postpone vacations because a bank committee met on Monday. Each request was temporary. Together, they had colonized my life. I signed the notices. At 6:14, Priya sent them. At 6:16, Peter called. At 6:17, Celia called. At 6:19, the chief operating officer of Caldwell Urban called. At 6:21, an email arrived from the lender confirming that all Braddock disbursements were suspended pending clarification. I did not feel triumphant. I felt tired. That distinction mattered. Revenge would have meant using my profession to hurt Peter. Responsibility meant refusing to let him use it to hurt anyone else. At 7, Margot and I drove to the brownstone Peter and I had shared in Lincoln Park. The house had been mine before I met him. I bought it after my divorce with savings, a modest inheritance from my father, and a mortgage I had paid off at 51. Peter lived there, contributed to utilities, and oversaw a kitchen renovation, but his name was not on the deed. That did not stop him from behaving as though he owned the front door. He was already inside when we arrived. Suitcases stood in the foyer. His son Adam sat on the bottom stair, elbows on his knees. Adam was 30, pale, and perpetually apologetic. He had inherited Peter's charm without his certainty. Addiction had consumed most of his 20s. For the past 11 months, he had been sober, working at a bicycle shop, and attending meetings. I cared for him deeply. Peter had often accused me of caring too much when Adam needed money, and too little when I refused to give it secretly. "Nora," Adam said, "Dad told me." Peter came from the kitchen. I asked him to help me pack. Margot stepped beside me. "We are here to supervise removal of personal property. Peter, you may take clothing, medication, electronics clearly belonging to you, and personal records. Furniture and disputed items remain." "This is absurd," he said. "Nora and I are having a disagreement." Adam looked from his father to me. "The wedding is canceled," I said. "Peter is moving out." "Because of yesterday?" "Because of many days, including yesterday." Peter lifted a hand. "This is not the time." Adam flinched. I noticed. I had seen him react that way before, whenever the first courthouse date was mentioned. 6 months earlier, Peter had failed to appear because Adam had supposedly been injured in a serious collision on Lakeshore Drive. Peter arrived home after midnight, smelling of hospital disinfectant and cold air. He said Adam was fortunate to be alive. I sent flowers, cooked soup, and never asked why Adam avoided me for 2 weeks. Now I looked at him. "Adam," I said, "how badly were you hurt in that accident?" Peter moved between us. "Do not drag him into this." Adam's face emptied. "It wasn't on Lakeshore Drive," he said. Peter turned. "Adam." "It was in the parking lot behind the shop. I backed into a delivery van. Nobody was hurt." The foyer became very quiet. "Then why did your father spend the day at the hospital?" I asked. Adam looked at Peter. He didn't. Peter sent Adam home 10 minutes later. He did it without shouting. That would have looked cruel in front of Margot. Instead, he put both hands on his son's shoulders and said, "You're tired. You are confused. Go back to your apartment before you say something you regret." Adam's eyes filled with the old shame Peter knew how to summon. I stepped between them. "He can stay if he wants." "This is my family," Peter said. "You are standing in my house, speaking to a 30-year-old man. He can decide for himself." Adam swallowed. "I should go." "Call me when you get home," I said. Peter's expression warned him not to. Adam left anyway. For the next hour, Peter packed in angry silence. Margot documented the items he removed. I stood in the library, watching rain trace the windows, and remembered the first time he entered that room. It was 3 months after the preservation hearing. We had spent a Saturday measuring decorative plaster in the Braddock ballroom. Peter brought sandwiches and remembered I hated mayonnaise. At the end of the day, we sat on the dusty stage while late sunlight moved across the broken floor. "Everyone sees a ruin," he said. "You see what it was meant to be. Buildings are easier than people. They leave evidence. Do you think people don't?" He kissed me then, carefully enough to let me refuse. I did not. Peter had been divorced for 8 years. His former wife, Elaine, lived in Arizona and communicated with him mostly through Adam. According to Peter, the marriage ended because Elaine could not tolerate the risks of entrepreneurship. He described her as beautiful, anxious, and forever demanding reassurance that no amount could satisfy. I should have wondered why his version required her to be both needy and absent. Instead, I admired his supposed resilience. He admired my competence. We became a couple so naturally that I barely noticed how our work and love braided together. When a commission hearing threatened the Braddock plan, I stayed up 2 nights revising the public access proposal. When an investor withdrew, I introduced Peter to a client who later contributed $3 million. When Adam relapsed, I found a treatment program and sat with Peter in the hospital cafeteria while he cried into untouched coffee. Peter was tender after a crisis. That was part of the pattern I understood only later. He gave his fullest attention when I had given everything. For a day or a week, he would cook dinner, rub my shoulders, leave a note beside the coffee machine. Gratitude looked enough like partnership that I stopped measuring the distance between them. Celia joined Caldwell Urban during our 2nd year together. She had led marketing for a hotel group in New York and arrived in Chicago with sharp suits, expensive taste, and an instinct for turning public space into private luxury. She and Peter had known each other years earlier. He said they met at a conference and had always stayed professionally friendly. "Was there ever anything between you?" I asked once. "One kiss after too much bourbon in Dallas," he said, smiling. "Long before you." Celia falls in love with momentum, not men. It was an answer designed to be memorable instead of precise. At first, Celia treated me with elaborate respect. She called me the soul of Braddock House. She quoted my reports and presentations and sent me white orchids after a commission approval. Then she began excluding my office from budget meetings. Historic materials became sentimental premiums. Public access became non-revenue circulation. When I objected, Peter positioned himself between us as the exhausted diplomat. "She is protecting the financing," he would say. "I am protecting the approval we already received. Then help me find a compromise." Compromise always moved in Celia's direction. Our engagement occurred during that same period. Peter proposed in January beside a frozen lake, with the Braddock cupola behind us. He said he wanted the building and our marriage to begin their next lives together. I did not hear the warning in the sentence. The formal wedding was scheduled for the following June, 18 months away. 6 months before it, Peter told me the lender wanted a clearer related party structure before final closing. He suggested a quiet legal ceremony first. "It's practical," he said, "and it gives us one day that belongs only to us." I loved the idea. Our first appointment was in November. I wore a cream dress and carried my mother's ribbon in my pocket. At 9 that morning, Peter called to say Adam had been in an accident. "Go," I told him. "Of course you should go." He did not ask me to come. I waited anyway, because he said the doctors were still evaluating Adam and he might arrive before the clerk closed. At 2, he said there were complications. At 4, he stopped answering. The next day, he held me in the kitchen and cried. I thought I might lose him. I apologized for having been disappointed. That was how he learned I would wait. Not because I was weak, but because he placed my kindness beside a catastrophe and taught me that choosing myself would make me cruel. Upstairs, a drawer slammed. Margot entered the library. "He is almost finished." He lied about Adam's accident. Yes. I defended him to my daughter. Tess said no responsible man would leave his fiancé without information for 7 hours. I told her she didn't understand what it meant to fear for a child. You worked with what you knew. I worked with what he gave me. Peter appeared in the doorway carrying a framed photograph of us from the night of our engagement. "Do you want this?" he asked. "No." He looked at the picture. "You were happy." I was. "Then do not rewrite 4 years because of one terrible week." "You rewrote the first Courthouse day before it happened." Adam was in crisis. He backed into a van. He had used again. He called me terrified. I was trying to keep him alive. "At a hospital?" "At first. Then I drove around with him. I was ashamed. I should have told you." The explanation came smoothly. He had already built it while packing. "Adam said you were not with him." Adam was high. His memory is not reliable. I saw then how completely Peter had prepared the ground. If Adam told the truth, addiction made him confused. If I questioned Peter, pain made me irrational. If Celia altered plans, pressure made it necessary. Everyone around him carried a flaw that could be used to discount their testimony. Only Peter remained the reasonable man at the center. "Take the photograph," I said. "I don't want a souvenir, Nora. I want my life." "Then you should have been present for it." He flinched. For 1 second, I saw grief instead of strategy. I believe it was real. People like Peter do not lie because they feel nothing. They lie because they feel entitled to preserve every comfort at once. He wanted Celia's admiration, my steadiness, Adam's loyalty, the lender's money, and the city's respect. He did not understand why choosing all of it required sacrificing anything of his own. He carried his suitcase downstairs. At the door, he turned. "I will give you until Friday. Then we need to sit down like adults." "No, Peter. You do not give me time in my own life." Margot opened the door. He left with the photograph under his arm. That night, I slept in the guest room because the bed we had shared felt crowded with everything I had not known. At 1:06 in the morning, Adam texted, "I'm sorry. There is more. I have proof." Adam came to my office the next morning carrying a paper grocery bag. He looked as if he had not slept. His dark hair needed cutting, and there was a tremor in his right hand that made me worry before I remembered worry did not give me the right to take control. "Have you called your sponsor?" I asked. "At 6. And again at 7. I'm sober." "Good." He set the bag on my conference table. Inside was an old phone, a packet of printed text messages, and a blue spiral notebook. "Dad gave me the phone last year when mine died," he said. It was one of his old company phones. He wiped most of it, but his messages kept syncing for a while because it was still signed into his account. I told him. He changed the password. I didn't go looking through anything after that. "Why do you still have it?" "Because I don't throw things away when I'm using. I hide them. Then, when I got sober, I found it in a storage box." He opened the notebook. Dates filled the pages in careful handwriting. "My counselor asked me to write down things I lied about and the people they affected. Step work. I wrote about the accident. I never gave you the amends because Dad said telling you would only ease my guilt by hurting you." The sentence sounded wise enough to hide its purpose. "What happened that day?" I asked. Adam stared at his hands. "I had been sober 4 months. I used in the back room at work, then backed into the van. My manager called Dad because I wasn't making sense. Dad came, got me into his car, and called my sponsor. Then Celia called." "You heard her?" "The car was connected to Bluetooth. She said the suite was paid for and asked how long he planned to make her wait." The room seemed to recede. "Which suite?" "Lake Geneva, the Grand Geneva Resort. Dad told her he was handling a family emergency." She said, "You always have an emergency when it's time to choose." I nearly admired the accuracy. What did Peter do? "He drove me to my sponsor's house. He told me he'd check me into treatment the next morning and that if you called, I should say I was at Northwestern. He said you couldn't know I relapsed because you'd give up on me." "I would not have given up on you. I know that now." "Then he left for Wisconsin?" Adam nodded. "He came back the next afternoon. He paid for treatment and my rent. I told myself I owed him the lie." Margot, sitting beside me, asked, "Do the messages on the old phone confirm any of this?" Adam handed it to her. "Some. Dad's messages with Celia are gone. but the hotel sent a confirmation to his company email. And there are texts between Dad and me. One read, "Nora may call. Keep it simple. Observation. No visitors." Another, sent at 11:48 that night, "I will handle everything tomorrow. Do not destroy my future because you messed up again." Adam watched me read. "He made it sound like your wedding was the future I could destroy," he said. But he was with her. Peter made many people responsible for his future. Margot asked Adam's permission to preserve the phone and copy the records. He agreed. "There is something else," he said. "I think they were together before she joined the company." That possibility should not have surprised me. Still, memory began opening doors. I remembered a fundraising dinner at the Chicago Architecture Center 2 years earlier. Celia wore a dark green dress. Peter placed his hand at her waist while introducing her to a donor, then removed it when he saw me watching. Later, she sat between us at dinner because a place card had supposedly been moved. She knew Peter hated olives in his martini. She knew the name of the professor who had nearly failed him at business school. When he told a story from a conference in Dallas, she corrected the hotel where it happened. On the ride home, I asked again whether their past was truly limited to one kiss. "Are we going to be one of those couples?" Peter said. "Which couples? The kind who put every friendship on trial?" I apologized. A year later, Celia came to our home for Thanksgiving because a snowstorm canceled her flight to New York. She brought wine, rearranged my seating plan, and carved the turkey because Peter said she was better at it. During dessert, she carried his plate to the kitchen without asking whether he was finished. June noticed. "She moves around him like a wife," my sister said while we washed glasses. "She works with him 60 hours a week." That is not an explanation, it is a warning. I told her Celia was lonely. I said mature women should not turn every close professional relationship into suspicion. I was proud of my fairness. Peter and Celia depended on it. After Adam left, Priya brought in the latest project correspondence. The city had placed an administrative hold on the Braddock revisions. Our insurer had appointed counsel. The lender requested a sworn statement from me and copies of the server audit. Peter sent no apology. Instead, an email arrived from Caldwell Urban's general counsel accusing my studio of creating avoidable confusion at a sensitive moment and demanding that we reaffirm our commitment to the project. Margot read it and smiled without amusement. "They have not denied the plans are false," she said. "We drafted a response asking who created the revisions, who placed my seal on them, and every person or institution that received them." At noon, Celia came to the office. Priya blocked her at reception, but Celia could make command sound like courtesy. "I only need 5 minutes with Nora. This is a professional matter." "Professional matters go through counsel," Priya said. "Then perhaps you should tell your employer that 6 years of work and 200 jobs are about to disappear because she is confusing heartbreak with ethics." I stepped into the hallway. 4 years, I said. "My studio has been involved for 4 years, you should know." "You approved our invoices." Celia turned. She wore a cream wool coat and carried a black leather folder. There was no sign of a woman who had collapsed the previous afternoon. "Nora, I am sorry Peter missed the ceremony. I truly am." "How was Northwestern?" Her expression did not change. "Humiliating. Stress and dehydration. They gave me fluids." "Which emergency room?" "You know which one. Peter told you." He didn't. For the first time, uncertainty entered her eyes. "I am not here to discuss my medical information." "Then discuss the drawings." She opened the folder and removed a printed email. It appeared to come from me, approving value engineering changes and instructing her team to issue the revised set under my seal. "I never sent that." "It came from your address." I looked closer. The displayed name was mine. The address beneath it was Nora. Bennett at Bennett Preservation, Co. My real domain ended in .com. That is not my address. Celia looked at it. Her fingers tightened around the page. "This is what your office sent." "No, it is what someone wanted your office to believe I sent." "Are you accusing me?" "I am asking you to preserve the original email and send it to both attorneys." She slid the page back into the folder. You have no idea what Peter has risked on this project. I know exactly what he was willing to risk. My name is printed on it. For a heartbeat, something like fear showed beneath her polish. Then she said, "He loves you. In his way." That is a peculiar reassurance from his mistress. Her face went white. I had not raised my voice. I did not need to. Priya stood behind me. 2 junior architects had gone still beside the copier. Celia looked around and understood that the secret had left the private room where it had protected her. "Be careful," she said. "Pain can make people invent very damaging stories." Fortunately, the voicemail tells its own. She left without another word. At 12:37, Peter texted. "What did you say to Celia?" Not, "Are you all right?" Not, "Can we talk?" Not, "I am sorry." The speed of his concern clarified every remaining question. I blocked his number. The first failed courthouse ceremony should have ended our engagement. The second should have removed every doubt. Instead, it made me work harder. 3 months after Adam's supposed accident, Peter asked for another appointment. He planned it himself. He chose Valentine's Day, reserved a private lunch at the Walnut Room, and arranged for Tess to fly in from Boston, where she was finishing a public health fellowship. "I want to repair what I broke," he said. For 6 weeks, he was the man I had promised myself he could be. He came home for dinner. He attended counseling twice. He told Adam the family could no longer survive secrets. He kept Celia out of our house and stopped taking her calls after 9. I mistook a change in tactics for a change in character. On the morning of February 14th, I woke at 5 and baked orange scones because Peter loved them. Snow fell in soft, clean sheets outside the kitchen windows. He came downstairs at 7 wearing a charcoal suit and the cufflinks I had given him. "Today," he said, kissing my forehead, "nothing comes before you." At 8:10, his chief operating officer called. A pipe had burst at Braddock House. Water was pouring into the electrical room, and the project insurer could not reach the site superintendent. Peter put the phone on speaker. I heard alarms and shouting. "Go," I said. He refused twice, which made his eventual departure look reluctant. He promised to meet me at the courthouse by 11. At 10:30, he texted that the fire department would not release the building. At noon, he said an investor had arrived unexpectedly. At 2, his phone went to voicemail. Tess sat beside me on the same wooden bench where I would later sit alone for the 3rd time. "Mom," she said, "we should leave. He is dealing with an emergency. He has employees. He is responsible for the building. He is also responsible for being here." I told her marriage required flexibility. Tess looked at me for a long time. "Does it require invisibility?" The question angered me because it was accurate. Peter arrived home at 9 that night. He brought photographs of standing water and a report from the fire department. The pipe had truly burst. What he did not tell me was that the site had been secured by 10:45 that morning. I learned that months later from a time-stamped incident report in the files Priya reviewed after the 3rd ceremony. Peter signed out at 11:12. His company car entered the garage beneath the Viceroy Hotel at 11:38 and left at 6:17. Celia had booked a suite there. Adam supplied the final piece. At 5 that afternoon, Peter called him and asked him to retrieve the car because Peter had been drinking with investors. Adam refused. In his notebook, he had written, "Dad said Nora is at Courthouse. Asked why he wasn't there. Dad said he would handle her." I did not see any of that on Valentine's Day. I saw a tired man standing in our kitchen with wet trouser cuffs and remorse in his eyes. "The whole project could have gone up in flames," he said. "I understand." "Do you? You barely spoke when I came in." So I comforted him. The next morning, he suggested we stop trying to force courthouse dates into a chaotic year and wait for the formal wedding. I agreed. Then, in April, the lender moved the expected closing date ahead. Peter said a legal marriage would simplify the related party disclosure. We scheduled the 3rd appointment. By then, waiting had become a test I was determined to pass. On Friday, 3 days after I canceled the wedding, Priya and I reconstructed the second ceremony from records. The work was exact and merciless. Incident logs, garage entries, hotel charges buried in a marketing expense report, 2 room service meals, champagne, a late checkout fee. "You don't have to read all of this," Priya said. "Yes, I do. I have to understand the difference between what happened and what I was told happened." There was no pleasure in the discovery, only the return of my own memory. Tess had been right. June had been right. I had been right in the quiet moments before Peter supplied a more convenient explanation. At noon, the Maine Heritage Trust sent my formal offer. I signed it. At 1, I informed our staff that Priya had accepted my proposal to purchase 51% of the studio over 5 years. She would become managing principal on July 1st. The room filled with applause, then tears. Priya hugged me so hard my glasses shifted. "I wish it were happening for a different reason," she whispered. "It is happening because you earned it. The reason I finally noticed the door does not diminish the room beyond it." At 3, Margot called. "The Braddock lender sent the documents associated with your name," she said. "You need to come to my office." On her conference table lay a draft personal guarantee, a schedule of assets, and a letter signed by Peter as managing member of Braddock Harbor Development. The asset schedule listed my Lincoln Park home at an estimated value of $1.7 million. It listed Bennett Preservation Studio at $2.2 million. It listed my retirement and investment accounts at $846,000. The amounts were close enough to be frightening. Where did he get these numbers? "We need to determine that," Margot said. "The good news is the guarantee itself is unsigned. The bad news is Peter represented in writing that you had agreed to sign it immediately following your legal marriage." She pointed to a paragraph in his letter. "My fiancé, Eleanor Bennett, has reviewed the attached guarantee with independent counsel and confirmed her willingness to provide support upon formalization of our marital partnership." "I never reviewed it," I said. "I know. You are my independent counsel." "I know." "Then he used you too." Margot's voice became very calm. "Yes." Attached to the letter was a related party disclosure bearing my electronic signature. This signature was not an image copied from a drawing. It had an audit certificate. The certificate said the document had been opened and signed from an internet address assigned to Caldwell Urban's corporate office. One signature too many had finally given us the thread. The lender's attorney agreed to preserve the electronic signature records and suspend any document containing my name. He sounded relieved that the loan had not closed. "For clarity," he said during a call with Margot and me, "the bank did not consider Ms. Bennett's guarantee complete. We expected an executed document after the marriage. Mr. Caldwell's representation supported our conditional approval but was not, by itself, sufficient to fund." "Did anyone verify that I had agreed?" I asked. There was a pause. Our relationship manager was told communications should go through Mr. Caldwell to avoid disrupting wedding preparations. Peter had turned courtesy into a wall. The bank gave us the name of the employee who uploaded the signed related party disclosure. Lydia Barnes, Celia's executive assistant. Lydia had used her work account and office computer. Whether she knew the signature was false remained unanswered. Margot advised me not to contact her. "We have enough to protect you," she said. "Now we let the bank, insurer, and authorities ask their questions." "And the house? The asset values?" "Peter may have seen tax statements and financial summaries while living with you. That is not the same as having a claim to them. The house is yours, the studio is yours, and Priya's once the sale closes. Your accounts are yours. Do not let the accuracy of a list make the plan behind it more powerful than it is." Still, I wanted to know how he had assembled it. I returned home with Margot and searched only the places Peter had used openly: the shared filing cabinet, the kitchen desk, the shelves in the library. We did not open his sealed boxes or attempt to access his private accounts. In the bottom drawer of the kitchen desk, beneath appliance warranties, I found a black folder labeled Personal. Estate Planning. Inside were copies of my property tax bill, a retirement summary I had printed for my accountant, the studio valuation Priya and I commissioned the previous year, and a draft letter to a wealth advisor I had never met. The letter began, "Peter and Eleanor Caldwell wish to consolidate household assets following their marriage." My future surname had already been selected. So had my intentions. There was also a draft post-nuptial agreement. Unlike the careful premarital agreement Margot had prepared, this one treated income and appreciation from our separate businesses as marital property. It gave Peter management authority over joint investment and development opportunities, and contained a broad consent allowing either spouse to pledge marital assets for business obligations up to $5 million. Would this hold up? I asked. Not if obtained through deception and without counsel, Margot said. But litigation over an invalid agreement can still consume years. He was going to put this in front of me after the wedding. The voicemail suggests that. I sat at the kitchen table where Peter had once described our marriage as a shelter from the world's uncertainty. I would never have signed it. Margot sat across from me. Peter may not have needed you to understand it. He needed you to be tired, in love, and accustomed to his deadlines. That was the cruelty of the plan. It did not depend on my stupidity. It depended on the qualities people had praised in me all my life: loyalty, steadiness, the ability to function under pressure, the willingness to help. He had studied my virtues as weaknesses. My phone, now set to reject his calls but retain messages, showed 17 voicemails. Margot and I listened to them in order. The first was apologetic. "Nora, please call me. Celia told me you accused her of an affair. I understand why this looks bad, but you are drawing the wrong conclusion." The fourth was wounded. "I cannot believe you sent that notice without warning me. You know what this project means to Adam's future." The seventh was angry. "If the loan fails, your studio will be named in the lawsuit. Think very carefully about the position you are creating." The 10th returned to tenderness. "I am sitting outside our restaurant. The corner table is empty. I keep remembering the first time you laughed at me for ordering a California Cabernet with lake trout. Please, Nora. We are better than this." The 15th mentioned the wedding. "You cannot cancel on 100 people and expect no consequences. At least meet me at the venue. Louise says the date has not been rebooked. We can turn the day into something smaller. Just us and the family." The 17th arrived while we listened. "The bank called. If you correct your notice and confirm the revisions were an internal misunderstanding, we can save the closing. I will agree to any counseling you want. I will remove Celia from the project. Tell me your terms." Margot stopped the recording. "Do you hear what is missing? The truth, and an apology for using your signature." I photographed the folder contents and placed the originals in a document box for Margot to hold. Then I changed the locks. That evening, Tess flew in from Boston without telling me. She arrived carrying a backpack and 2 cartons of Thai food. When I opened the door, she looked at my bare left hand and began to cry. "I am sorry," she said. "I am so sorry. I was angry after the second courthouse day." I pulled her inside. "You were not wrong. I wanted to be." We sat on the kitchen floor because the table was covered with copies of the life Peter had planned for my assets. Tess listened without interrupting as I told her about Celia, the voicemail, the drawings, and the guarantee. "Did you love him?" she asked when I finished. "Yes. Do you still?" I thought about it. "I love the man I believed I knew. I don't know where to put that love now." Tess leaned her head against my shoulder. "You don't have to put it anywhere tonight." She stayed for the weekend. We packed books, sorted clothes, and labeled boxes for Maine. On Sunday, we carried Peter's remaining belongings into the front parlor for collection. Each object told a story. His rowing medals, his architectural models, the blue sweater he wore when he proposed, a ceramic bowl Adam made in treatment. I did not break anything. I did not burn photographs. Destruction would not restore me. At the bottom of a closet, Tess found the white guest book for the June wedding. The first page had been printed in gold. Eleanor and Peter. The story continues. Tess looked at me. "What should we do with this?" I opened to the second page and wrote one sentence. Eleanor's story continued. Then I closed the book and placed it in the donation box. The formal wedding was 6 weeks away, but some guests had already bought plane tickets. My sister had reserved a house. Tess had ordered a dress. Peter's board members had arranged a private breakfast around what they believed would be both a wedding and an investor celebration. Silence would have protected Peter's image at the expense of everyone else's plans. On Monday morning, I sent a message to the guest list. Peter and I have ended our engagement, and the June 22nd wedding has been canceled. I am sorry for the disruption this may cause. Please contact the hotels and airlines directly regarding your reservations. I am safe, supported, and certain in my decision. I ask that you respect our privacy and not contact either of us for details. I did not mention an affair. I did not accuse him of fraud. Facts under review belonged in the hands of counsel, not in a family email. Within minutes, replies arrived. My cousins sent love. Former clients offered guest rooms in Maine. One of Peter's aunts wrote, "I wish I could say I was surprised." Elaine waited too. That message stayed with me. Peter's sister, Caroline, called 3 times. When I finally answered, she did not ask what happened. "How could you humiliate him this way?" she said. "By canceling a wedding that will not occur? By telling the board before he had a chance to manage the situation?" "It was a guest list, Caroline, not a press release. You know how fragile the project is. Peter built it for your future too. Did he tell you I was guaranteeing the loan?" Silence. "Caroline? He said you wanted to invest." "I did not. There must be a misunderstanding. The Caldwell family used that word the way some families used prayer. Ask Peter to show you the guarantee," I said. "Then ask why it lists assets I never offered." She ended the call soon after. At the studio, we prepared the transition to Priya's leadership. I recorded project histories, introduced her to key clients, and transferred signing authority. The process forced me to see how much of my identity had been tied to the company. Leaving Peter was painful. Leaving the daily life of the studio was grief of another kind. "You can change your mind about Maine," Priya said one evening as we reviewed the buyout documents. "You don't have to leave the city to prove you are done with him." "I know. Then why go?" I looked through the conference room glass at the drafting tables, material samples, and model fragments accumulated across 26 years. Because I wanted that job before everything happened. I said no for Peter. If I stay only to prove I am not running, he is still choosing for me. Priya smiled. "That sounds like the correct answer." Margot completed the sale documents. Priya would buy a controlling interest through a note paid from future profits, protecting jobs and allowing the studio to continue without a rushed sale. I would remain available as a consultant on 3 projects, but would not be responsible for Braddock House. My formal withdrawal from Braddock required more than a personal letter. Because someone had used my seal, I had to document the status of the work, identify approved and unauthorized sets, and explain what another qualified architect would need to assume responsibility. I spent 4 days creating that record. Peter described it to mutual friends as sabotage. He told one client I had become unstable after the wedding cancellation. He told another that my daughter was pressuring me to move east. He told his board the signature issue was a software error caused by my staff. Priya heard that last version and asked whether she could respond. "With records," I said, "never with adjectives." We issued a concise professional statement. Bennett Preservation Studio had not created or approved the May 10th revisions. Server logs confirmed no access or issuance. The matter had been reported to the appropriate parties. The studio would cooperate fully. No drama, no speculation. The truth did not need decoration. On Wednesday, Lydia Barnes, Celia's assistant, hired her own attorney. Through him, she provided the lender with emails showing that Celia had directed her to create the false address and send the approval message to the project team. Lydia claimed she believed I had verbally authorized it. The email chain made that difficult to accept. At 9:14, the night before the revisions were issued, Lydia asked, "Does Nora know we're doing this?" Celia replied, "Peter has her handled. We cannot miss another deadline. At 9:19, Lydia wrote, "What about the seal?" Celia answered, "Use the prior sheet. This is temporary for lender review, not permit. We will replace it after closing." But the false plans had also been uploaded to the city portal. Peter was copied on both messages. He responded with one word: proceed. When Margot showed me, I felt the final internal door close. Until then, some part of me had preserved a softer possibility. Perhaps Celia manipulated the documents and Peter looked away. Perhaps panic made him careless. Perhaps he loved me badly but had not deliberately placed my license in danger. Proceed left no room for that story. That afternoon, I received an envelope at home. Peter's handwriting covered the front. Inside was the card on which he had planned to write his courthouse vows. It was blank. Around it, he had written a letter. "Nora, I know you have seen documents that make decisions under pressure look worse than they were. Celia pushed a temporary solution, and I failed to stop it. I will take responsibility for that. But please remember the thousands of good decisions between us. Remember Adam's recovery, Christmas mornings, the night we danced alone at Braddock House? Do not let lawyers turn our life into evidence. Meet me on June 22nd. If you still cannot marry me, at least let us speak where we were meant to begin." At the bottom, he added, "I will be there this time." I read the sentence without crying. Then I handed the letter to Margot. The electronic signature company produced its audit log under subpoena from the lender. The related party disclosure had been sent to an address created under my name, opened from Caldwell Urban's network, and signed using a verification code delivered to Celia's company phone. The false email approval came from the same network. The copied seal file had been extracted from a preliminary PDF by a junior designer acting on Lydia's instructions. He had preserved his chat messages because he feared he would be blamed. Peter had been copied at every decisive point. There was no longer a question of clerical error. The lender terminated its conditional commitment and referred the matter to its fraud unit. The city opened an investigation into the unauthorized plans. My licensing board requested a statement, not because they suspected me, but because a professional seal creates a duty to act even when it is misused. I gave them everything. Peter's attorney sent Margot a settlement proposal. Caldwell Urban would acknowledge a document control failure, pay the overdue invoice, and release my firm from the project if I agreed not to pursue claims, not to share the voicemail, and not to disparage Peter or Celia. The proposal also required me to state that no one intended to falsify my approval. "They want you to certify their state of mind," Margot said. "How generous." No, that was my assessment. We responded with narrower terms. Pay all outstanding fees. Confirm in writing that neither I nor my staff issued the May 10th plans. Stop using my name, biography, and work in investor materials. Return or destroy my seal image. Preserve all evidence. No restriction on truthful testimony. Peter rejected it. Then he began calling people I loved. He told June that I was abandoning my company in a panic. He told Tess that moving to Maine would isolate me from my medical care and professional network. He called David, my former husband, and asked him to help Nora see reason. David called me afterward. I told him that in 21 years of marriage, I never once succeeded in telling you what to think, he said. I suggested he save time and try the truth. I laughed for the first time in days. "Thank you. Are you all right?" Eventually. "That sounds like you." Even Adam was not spared. Peter threatened to stop paying for his outpatient program if he cooperated with the lender. Adam's counselor helped him apply for assistance, and I offered to cover 1 month while the application was reviewed. "I won't take your money," Adam said. "It is not payment for testimony. It is a bridge to keep you in treatment. Margot will document it, and your counselor can pay the program directly." He looked ashamed. "Dad says you are turning me against him. Your relationship with your father is yours. I will not ask you to hate him. I will ask you not to lie for him." Adam nodded. The distinction seemed to steady him. At home, Tess and I packed the last boxes. She returned to Boston on Sunday, but planned to meet me in Maine in July. June found me a furnished apartment in a brick building overlooking Portland's eastern promenade. It had sloping floors, radiators that clanged, and windows facing the bay. "The landlord says the windows leak in storms," June warned. "I know someone who understands old windows." The moving truck was scheduled for June 20th, 2 days before the canceled wedding. I planned to spend one final night in the house, sign the studio transaction on the 21st, and drive east the next morning. Peter learned the date from a mutual friend. He came to the brownstone on June 19th and stood on the sidewalk while movers carried boxes from the front hall. I watched through the window until he rang the bell. Margot had advised me not to meet him alone. Priya was upstairs helping pack, and my neighbor, Mrs. Alvarez, was in her garden next door. I opened the door but kept the chain fastened. Peter looked older. The easy polish had gone from him. His company had placed Celia and Lydia on leave. 2 investors had withdrawn. The Braddock site was locked, except for safety crews. "You are really leaving," he said. "Yes. Your life is here." Part of it was. "And the house?" "I am renting it to a family for a year. After that, I will decide." We were supposed to grow old in that house. We were supposed to be married 3 times. He closed his eyes. "I ended it with Celia. That is between you and Celia. It was never what you think. I heard you. I saw the hotel records. I saw the messages. You missed our first ceremony to spend the night with her in Wisconsin. You missed the second to spend the day with her at the Viceroy. You missed the third because you were celebrating with her while telling me she was in an emergency room. Which part am I thinking incorrectly?" His face collapsed inward. "I was afraid," he said. "Of what?" "Of marrying again. Of failing again. Of losing the project." Celia understood the pressure. With you, everything mattered so much. It was the nearest he had come to honesty. And even then he made my value the burden that drove him elsewhere. "You did not have to marry me," I said. "You only had to stop asking me to wait for a man who had no intention of arriving." I intended to arrive. Intentions that fail 3 times are choices. He gripped the iron railing. "Come tomorrow. The venue is still ours until midnight. No guests. No board. I will bring every document. I will answer every question." "Why there?" "Because I cannot bear for the day to be empty." At last, I understood the difference between us. Peter feared an empty day. I feared an empty life. For years, I had filled both for him. "The day will not be empty," I said. "It simply will not belong to you." I closed the door. The following morning, the movers drove away with my furniture and books. Priya and I signed the final studio documents at Margot's office. At 4, my 6 employees gathered around the conference table with sparkling cider and a lemon cake. This time, the lemon cake belonged to me. Priya raised her glass. "To Nora, who taught us that preservation does not mean preventing change. It means knowing what deserves to survive it." I looked at the people who had helped build my professional life. I looked at the original Braddock model in the corner, its restored public walkway still open to the lake. "To Priya," I said, "and to work done under our own names." That evening, I returned to the nearly empty brownstone. On the mantel lay Peter's engagement ring, his blank vow card, and the guest book Tess had rescued from the donation box at the last moment. I placed all 3 in a padded envelope. On a separate sheet, I wrote, "Peter, I waited at 3 courthouses for the life you promised. I will not wait at the glass house for an explanation you had 4 years to give. The ring is returned. The wedding is canceled. The house is no longer your home, and my name is no longer available for your project. Do not follow me. Nora." I left the envelope with Margot for delivery at noon on June 22nd. At 6 the next morning, I put my mother's blue ribbon in my coat pocket, locked the brownstone, and drove out of Chicago. Chicago disappeared gradually. First, the familiar brick neighborhoods gave way to expressways. Then the skyline narrowed in my rearview mirror until the towers looked like a row of gray teeth. Finally, near the Indiana line, Even the tallest building slipped below the horizon. I expected to feel free. Instead, I cried so hard at a toll booth that the attendant asked whether I needed an ambulance. "No," I said, wiping my face. "I am only moving." He handed back my change. Sometimes that's the same kind of emergency. The moving truck had left the day before. My car held 2 suitcases, a box of documents, my mother's ribbon, and a cooler June insisted I pack. I had planned to drive to Cleveland, sleep, and continue east the next morning. The canceled wedding was scheduled for the following day. My phone remained on Do Not Disturb, but messages appeared whenever I stopped. Peter wrote from 3 different email addresses. The first message asked whether I had left yet. The second accused Margot of engineering our separation. The third contained a photograph of Braddock House at sunrise. "We built this together," he wrote. That was true. The building had mattered to me before Peter did. I had spent thousands of hours studying its masonry, interviewing former swimmers, and fighting to preserve the public path along the lake. Leaving Peter did not erase my love for the place. But love for a building, like love for a person, did not require surrendering my name to whoever claimed to own it. I archived the messages without responding. Near South Bend, David called. Tess had told him I was on the road. "How is the car?" he asked. "Full of enough emergency food to survive a Canadian winter." That sounds like June. She put labels on everything. That also sounds like June. We talked about practical things. Construction near Toledo, a storm forecast, whether I had checked the tire pressure. Before ending the call, he said, "For what it is worth, I am proud of you." For ending another engagement? For not confusing endurance with success. We did that for a long time too. Our marriage had not survived, but enough respect had. That gave me hope that endings did not have to poison everything that came before them. I reached Cleveland before dusk and checked into a hotel overlooking the lake. A wedding party occupied the lobby. Bridesmaids in lavender dresses carried garment bags toward the elevator, while a little boy dragged a pillow printed with gold rings. I almost turned around. Then the bride's mother dropped a box of place cards. I knelt to help her gather them. "You saved me," she said. "I only picked up paper. Today, that counts as saving." In my room, I ate June's chicken salad and watched freighters move across the dark water. The loneliness came in waves. I missed Peter's habit of reading headlines aloud. I missed the weight of his shoes beside the door and the smell of cedar soap in the bathroom. I even missed the disagreements we had rehearsed so many times they felt like shared rituals. Leaving a dishonest man did not make every honest memory false. That was the hardest truth to hold. At 10, Adam called. "Dad invited people to the glass house tomorrow," he said. "The wedding is canceled. He says it is a private project gathering. Caroline, 3 board members, some investors. He told them you may still come." "I won't." "I know. He asked me to be there." "You do not have to go. My counselor thinks I should decide based on what protects my sobriety, not what punishes Dad. I haven't decided yet." "That sounds wise. Are you really in Ohio?" "Yes." He released a breath. "Good. I was afraid he would talk you into meeting him." "So was I. That is why I left." The admission embarrassed me, but Adam understood. "Sometimes distance is the decision you already made," he said. I slept badly. At dawn, I walked along the lake before returning to the highway. The morning of my canceled wedding arrived clear and bright. By noon, when Margot was scheduled to deliver the ring and letter, I was driving through Pennsylvania beneath an endless blue sky. At exactly 12, my dashboard clock changed. I took my mother's ribbon from my pocket and tied it around the steering wheel for 1 mile. Then I pulled into a rest area, untied it, and placed it back in my coat. The ribbon belonged to my mother, not to a ceremony Peter had missed. I drove on. I learned what happened at the glass house in pieces. Margot told me what she witnessed. Adam told me what happened after she left. Luis, the venue coordinator, later filled in the parts neither of them had seen. Peter arrived before 10 on the morning of June 22nd. He wore the tuxedo he had ordered for our wedding. The venue had rebooked the evening, but allowed him a 2-hour private meeting under the remaining portion of our canceled contract. He had asked staff to leave the floral arch in place. The florist had not installed our flowers, so Peter sent an assistant to buy white roses from 3 grocery stores. He arranged 20 chairs facing the empty arch. Caroline came. Adam came. 4 Caldwell Urban Board members and 2 investors came, believing they were attending a confidential briefing about the lender investigation. Celia was not invited. Neither were any of my relatives. Peter told the group I had suffered an emotional crisis brought on by the pressure of the wedding and project. He said I had gone to stay with June but was reconsidering. He described the false drawings as a temporary coordination set that had never been intended for construction. He said aggressive attorneys had transformed a correctable misunderstanding into a scandal. And the affair? Adam asked from the back row. Peter told him they would discuss family matters privately. Adam stood. You made me a family matter when you used my relapse to miss your first wedding. One of the investors asked what he meant. Before Peter could answer, Margot arrived. She wore a red suit and carried the padded envelope. She did not approach the floral arch. She handed the envelope directly to Peter in front of the venue manager and asked him to sign a receipt. Is Nora coming? He asked. No. Did she send a message? Everything Ms. Bennett wishes to communicate is in the envelope, he signed. Margot left without watching him open it. Peter took the envelope to the arch. Perhaps he believed a public setting would force my words into the story he wanted to tell. He removed the ring, the blank vow card, and my letter. He read it silently. Adam said the room changed as Peter reached the sentence, "My name is no longer available for your project." One of the board members asked whether the lender had formally withdrawn. Another asked who had authorized use of my seal. Peter folded the letter and said the questions could wait. Then Celia walked in. She had learned about the meeting from Lydia. She wore a pale pink dress that looked painfully close to something chosen for a wedding. Tell them, she said. Peter stared at her. You are not supposed to be here. Tell them you approved the drawings. Tell them you asked me to keep Nora away from the bank. Tell them whose idea the fake email was. Carolyn tried to lead her aside. Celia shook her off. He told the board I acted alone, she said. He told his lawyer I manipulated him because I was jealous of Nora. Peter lowered his voice. Celia, you need to stop. You promised me 10% of Braddock House after the loan closed. You promised we would be together after you married her. The words were not shouted. That made them worse. Peter looked at Adam, perhaps hoping his son would intervene. Adam stayed in his chair. One investor asked Celia whether she had proof. She placed a folder on the front table. Inside were messages, draft equity agreements, and a private memorandum Peter had sent her. According to Adam, the memorandum described the marriage as a way to stabilize consultant alignment and unlock additional household support. Household support meant my property. Celia had kept evidence because Peter's promises to her were as unreliable as his promises to me. The meeting ended without a vote. 2 board members left together, carrying copies of the documents. Caroline sat in the front row and cried. Peter remained beneath the grocery store roses after everyone else had gone. Luis found him there at 2:15. He asked me whether you had truly canceled every vendor yourself, Luis told me months later. What did you say? I said you had. Then he asked whether you seemed angry. I told him no. You seemed finished. While Peter stood at the wedding without a bride, I crossed into New York. I knew none of it yet. I spent that evening in Albany, eating soup at a diner beside a retired schoolteacher named Ruth. We began talking because she admired my mother's blue ribbon, which was tied around the handle of my handbag. Wedding keepsake? She asked. Almost. I told her only that I had left a relationship and was moving to Maine. Ruth stirred cream into her coffee. I left my husband at 62. Everyone called it brave. It felt more like being seasick for a year. Did it get better? No, she said. Then she smiled. I got better. That turned out to be more useful. The next morning, as I followed the highway through Massachusetts, Adam sent one message. You were right to go. I did not ask what had happened. Not yet. Some truths could wait until I was safely beyond their power to turn me around. June stood outside my new apartment, wearing yellow rain boots and waving both arms as if I might miss the entire state of Maine without her assistance. I parked at the curb and barely had time to turn off the engine before she opened my door. "You are late," she said, pulling me into a hug. I moved across 4 time zones of emotion. Maine is in the same time zone as Chicago. "Do not ruin a good sentence with geography," she laughed, and the sound loosened something in my chest. My apartment occupied the 3rd floor of a narrow brick building built in 1891. The stairs tilted left. The banister had 6 layers of paint. The front windows overlooked Casco Bay, where ferries moved between green islands under a sky so wide it made me feel small in a merciful way. The movers had placed half my boxes in the wrong rooms. June had stocked the refrigerator and left a vase of blue hydrangeas on the kitchen table. "Not white tulips," she said. "Thank you." That first week, I slept 12 hours a night and woke tired. I forgot which cabinet held the coffee. I reached toward the empty half of the bed. Once, while unpacking Peter's favorite history book, I sat on the floor for 40 minutes, holding it against my chest. June did not tell me to throw it away. She placed it on a shelf and made tea. The Maine Heritage Trust occupied a former customs building near the waterfront. On my first day, Susan Caldwell, no relation to Peter, a coincidence we addressed once and then ignored, introduced me to a staff of 14. Their projects ranged from a timber frame meeting house in a farming town to a 1930s cinema threatened by a pharmacy expansion. No one asked me to save $40 million by Friday. My first major assignment was the Harbor Reading Room, a granite library in the coastal town of Bellwether Point. A winter storm had damaged its copper roof and flooded the children's wing. The town wanted to repair the building without turning it into a museum. At the first site meeting, I met Samuel Pierce, a 60-year-old carpenter who specialized in historic windows. He had silver at his temples, sawdust on his jacket, and no interest in impressing me. "The sash can be repaired," he said when the town manager suggested replacements. "It will take longer than plastic windows, but the building has already waited 109 years. Another 6 weeks won't insult it." I smiled despite myself. "Buildings are patient," I said. "People are the problem." He looked at me, considered the statement, and returned to measuring the frame. "Sometimes," he said. That was our entire first conversation. I was grateful. Peter had made attention feel like sunlight. Samuel's restraint felt like shade on a hot day. I did not consider romance. I was not interested in replacing one man with another, as if companionship were a chair that should never remain empty. I wanted mornings in which my first thought belonged to me. Those mornings came slowly. I walked along the eastern promenade before work. I learned the fairy horns. I ate dinner with June and her husband, Malcolm, every Sunday. Tess accepted a position in Boston and began visiting twice a month. On rainy evenings, I unpacked one box at a time. I also attended therapy. At my 3rd session, I told Dr. Elaine Foster that I felt foolish for missing obvious signs. "Would you say that to a client whose contractor falsified records?" she asked. "No." "Why not?" "Because deception is designed to be believed." She waited. I disliked therapists who used silence effectively. "I see your point," I said. "Seeing is not the same as believing. We can work on the second part." Chicago continued to reach me through legal updates. The lender investigation expanded. Caldwell Urban's board placed Peter on administrative leave. Celia resigned before they could terminate her. Lydia cooperated. My licensing board confirmed that I had responded appropriately and closed its review without action against me. That letter made me cry harder than the affair had. My profession was not only work. It was the place where I trusted my own judgment. Peter's use of my seal had attacked that trust. The board's letter did not repair it, but it gave me solid ground. At the end of July, Priya called from the Braddock site. The board had asked her studio to prepare an emergency stabilization plan. Because she now controlled the company and I had withdrawn, there was no automatic conflict, but she wanted my blessing. "You do not need it," I said. "I know. I want it." I looked out at the bay. "Protect the public walkway," I said. "And check the west parapet after every heavy rain." I already did. "Then you are exactly who they need." After the call, I walked to the harbor reading room. Samuel was teaching 2 apprentices how to remove glazing putty without cracking the old glass. He explained each movement once, then let them try. When one young man split a brittle edge, Samuel did not shame him. He showed him how to stabilize it. "Mistakes leave evidence," I said. Samuel glanced up. "So does repair." That night, I wrote the sentence in a notebook. For the first time since leaving Chicago, the quiet in my apartment did not feel like absence. It felt like room. Adam called in early August. His voice sounded clear. "I gave a statement to the bank and the city," he said. "Dad knows." "How are you?" "Not good. Still sober. Both can be true." "Yes." He had moved into a recovery house after Peter stopped paying for his apartment. The treatment assistants came through, and he was working full-time at the bicycle shop. He had also begun repairing donated bikes for teenagers. "Dad says I chose you over him," he said. "Did you?" "I chose not to lie." "Then you chose yourself." He was quiet. "That sounds like something you would put in a frame. Only if you promise not to sell it in a gift shop." He laughed, then grew serious. I told them about the wedding days and the phone. I also told them about a meeting last fall. Dad asked me to drive him home because he had been drinking. Celia was with him. They argued in the car. "About what?" "You." Celia said he kept moving the wedding because he wanted access to your assets but did not want to end things with her. Dad said marriage would calm the investors and that you would never sign a guarantee while you were only engaged. I sat down on the edge of my bed. "Why didn't you tell me?" "I don't know. I was scared he would cut me off. I was scared you would leave and he would blame me. Mostly, I was used to being the least reliable person in every room. When you think no one should trust you, keeping other people's secrets feels like the only useful thing you can do." The honesty in his words hurt more than excuses would have. "Adam, your father made his choices before you heard them. You did not create his affair or his plan. But I helped hide them." "Yes." He inhaled sharply. I could have softened the answer, but forgiveness without truth was only another hiding place. "You helped hide them," I continued. "Then you stopped. You apologized. You gave evidence even when it cost you. That does not erase the first choice. It makes the next one matter. Do you forgive me?" I looked at the half-unpacked box near my closet. Inside was the ceramic bowl Adam made in treatment, the one Peter had left behind by mistake. I had carried it to Maine because I could not bear to discard proof that Adam had once made something while trying to save his life. "I do," I said. "But forgiveness is not permission to use me as a secret keeper again." "I understand." After our call, I mailed him the bowl. 2 weeks later, he sent a photograph. The bowl sat on the windowsill of his small recovery house room. Inside it were 3 objects: his 6-month sobriety coin, a bicycle spoke, and a folded note. The note read, "The next choice matters." Peter's choices were narrowing. His board removed him as chief executive after an independent review confirmed that he authorized the false plans and misrepresented my financial commitment. The company did not collapse. That was important to me. 78 employees kept their jobs under an interim leader. The Braddock entity entered a restructuring process while investors negotiated with a new developer. Peter retained an ownership interest, but it was heavily diluted. His board seat was suspended. His professional reputation, built on being the man who could rescue any deal, suffered the consequence he feared most. People stopped accepting his explanations without documents. Celia's attorney approached Margot about cooperation. Celia had evidence of Peter's false statements to investors, but she wanted protection from claims related to the email and seal. "Do I have to speak with her?" I asked. "No." "Will refusing hurt the case?" "No. The evidence speaks for itself." "Then I don't want to." I had spent months being asked to understand why Peter and Celia acted as they did. pressure, fear, ambition, love. Those explanations might matter in court or in their private consciences. They did not require my participation. At the harbor reading room, the repaired windows returned one by one. Samuel and his apprentices had preserved the old wavy glass. When sunlight passed through it, bright lines moved across the floor like water. "We could have installed new windows in half the time," the town manager said. Samuel wiped his hands on a cloth. "Yes. You don't sound defensive. You hired us to do it right, not fast." The simplicity of the answer stayed with me. Peter had made speed a moral virtue. He treated every delay as failure, unless the delay was his. In Maine, I began to relearn the difference between patience and postponement. Patience served the work. Postponement protected the person avoiding it. In September, the Chicago Preservation Commission scheduled a public hearing on the future of Braddock House. The unauthorized drawings had violated the conditions of approval, but the commission did not want the historic building abandoned. The new lender and interim company leadership proposed reinstating the last legitimate plan set, appointing Priya as preservation architect, and separating the public walkway into a protected covenant that future owners could not close. Peter opposed the restructuring because it reduced his control. His attorney subpoenaed me as a witness. I did not want to return to Chicago. For 3 months, I had built a life whose peace depended partly on distance. The thought of walking into a room with Peter tightened my throat. Margot did not tell me to be brave. "Your testimony can be remote unless the commission requires otherwise," she said. "We will ask." The commission allowed me to appear by video. On the day of the hearing, I sat in a conference room at the Maine Heritage Trust. Susan remained outside in case I needed anything. Margot sat beside me on the screen in Chicago. Priya occupied the witness table. Peter sat behind his attorneys, wearing a dark suit and the controlled expression he once used when we faced preservation opponents together. For 2 hours, witnesses explained electronic records, altered plans, financing conditions, and professional responsibility. When my turn came, I raised my right hand and swore to tell the truth. Peter's attorney began gently. "Miss Bennett, you ended a romantic relationship with Mr. Caldwell immediately before notifying the city about the disputed drawings, correct?" "I ended the relationship the day before the notice." "You were emotionally distressed?" "Yes." "Angry?" "Yes." "And within 24 hours, you took an action that caused the lender to suspend funding." "I notified the city and lender that plans bearing my seal were not mine. The lender chose its response." "Could you have corrected the record privately without withdrawing?" "No. Once unauthorized sealed plans were distributed, I had a duty to identify them to every known recipient." "Did personal anger influence your decision?" "It influenced how I felt. It did not change what the documents required me to do." He showed my email to Peter, ending the project relationship. "You wrote, 'My name is no longer available to support your private interests.' That sounds personal, does it not?" It was personal. The formal notice attached to it was professional. The commission chair asked to see the attachment. It listed sheet numbers, revision dates, code concerns, contract provisions, and transition requirements. No accusation of an affair appeared anywhere. Peter's attorney moved on. Margot asked only 3 questions. "Did you approve the May 10th drawings?" "No." "Did you authorize anyone to place your seal or signature on them?" "No." "If the same facts arose today, would you issue the same notice?" "Immediately." When I finished, I looked toward Peter on the screen. For once, he did not look angry or persuasive. He looked tired. The commission approved the restructuring plan. It referred the unauthorized filing to the city's law department but allowed stabilization work to continue under Priya. The public walkway covenant became permanent. The cheaper windows and reduced corridor were rejected. Braddock House would survive. Peter's version of the project would not. After the hearing, Priya called me from the empty commission chamber. "I thought winning would feel louder," she said. "Preservation victories are usually paperwork followed by years of maintenance." "You sound happy about that." "I am. The point had never been to destroy the building because Peter hurt me. The point was to prevent him from treating everything: the building, my work, my home, even our marriage, as material available for his design. That evening, Samuel and I inspected the harbor reading room roof after a storm. The new copper shone against the wet granite. From the children's wing came the sound of volunteers returning books to shelves. "Good hearing?" he asked. I had told him only that I was testifying about a former project. "The building will be protected." Then it was good. The man who tried to misuse it was not entirely destroyed. Samuel gave me a puzzled look. Was that the goal? No. Then it was a very good hearing. We stood beneath the repaired eave while rainwater moved cleanly through the gutter. For years, Peter had taught me to measure success by whether he was satisfied. Maine was teaching me to use other standards. Celia wrote to me in October. The letter came through Margot with a note from her attorney stating that Celia did not expect a reply. It was 12 pages long, typed, and signed by hand. I left it unopened for 4 days. When I finally read it, I did so in June's kitchen while she made apple butter. The room smelled of cinnamon. Rain tapped the windows. Ordinary comfort gave the words boundaries. Celia did not ask me to forgive her. She described meeting Peter 9 years earlier at a development conference in Dallas. Their affair began while he was separated from Elaine, but had not told anyone the marriage was ending. After Peter's divorce, Celia expected him to build a life with her. Instead, he moved their relationship into hotel rooms and business trips. He said Adam needed stability. Then he said his company did. Then he met me. When Celia joined Caldwell Urban, Peter promised the proximity would become a bridge to a public relationship. By then, he had proposed to me. He told Celia the engagement was necessary because my professional support held the Braddock approvals together. He said the formal wedding was mostly social and could be delayed until the financing was secure. When I insisted on a courthouse marriage before the formal event, he panicked. Celia admitted she used that panic. On the first courthouse date, she insisted he meet her in Wisconsin or end their affair. On the second, she booked the Viceroy suite after the pipe emergency, knowing he had promised to marry me that day. On the third, she arranged champagne after the lender meeting and dared him to choose. He chose her 3 times. He also chose the expectation that I would remain. Celia wrote that Peter promised her 10% of Braddock House and the title of managing partner after closing. He said he would ask me to sign the guarantee during the emotional glow following our legal marriage. Once the project stabilized, he would separate our finances and decide what kind of marriage was possible. Decide. Even in his promises to another woman, my life remained an option on his desk. Celia claimed she did not know he had falsified my related party signature until after it was done. She did admit directing Lydia to create the false email and reuse my seal. Her justification was brutally familiar. The changes were temporary. The deadline was impossible. Peter had said he would obtain my approval later. At the end, she wrote, "I told myself you were protected because Peter loved you, and I was entitled to take from the project because I loved him. Both beliefs allowed me to profit from your trust. I was not deceived in the way you were. I saw enough truth to choose differently and did not. I am sorry." June set down the wooden spoon. "Do you believe her?" "I believe she is sorry that the story ended differently than she expected. I also believe some of the shame is real." "Will you answer?" "I don't know. Dr. Foster helped me decide. A response is not a reward Celia earns or a punishment you withhold," she said. "It is a boundary you choose. What outcome would serve you?" I wanted Celia to know that her apology did not create a relationship between us. I also wanted to acknowledge the rare sentence in which she accepted responsibility without borrowing mine. I wrote 3 lines. "Celia, I received your letter. I appreciate the portions in which you accepted responsibility for your choices. I do not want further personal contact, and I expect you to continue cooperating truthfully with the investigations. Nora." Margot sent it. Celia honored the boundary. Her cooperation helped the lender and board reconstruct Peter's representations. It did not absolve her. She paid a civil settlement, lost the equity she had expected, and left Chicago. Lydia entered a separate agreement after showing that she had objected before following Celia's instructions. The junior designer kept his job under new supervision. Consequences arrived in different sizes because responsibility had come in different sizes. That felt more like justice than watching every person fall into the same fire. Peter requested mediation before the lender filed a civil fraud suit. I was not a party to every dispute, but my claims for unpaid fees, misuse of my professional identity, and legal costs were included. Margot arranged for me to attend remotely from Portland. The mediation began at 9 and lasted 11 hours. Most of the day involved numbers. Caldwell Urban's insurers argued over coverage. The board calculated the cost of replacing drawings and delaying construction. The lender demanded reimbursement for due diligence. Peter's attorneys disputed intent while offering money that suggested they understood the evidence. My terms remained simple: full payment of outstanding invoices, reimbursement of my professional defense costs, a written acknowledgement that the disputed drawings and signatures were unauthorized, permanent removal of my name and image from Peter's materials, no retaliation against Adam or my studio, and no restriction on truthful testimony. At 7 in the evening, Peter asked to speak to me. Margot advised against a private conversation. We agreed to a joint video room with both attorneys present. Peter appeared on the screen from a conference room in Chicago. He had lost weight. Gray stubble shadowed his jaw. I felt compassion before I could stop it. Compassion was not consent. I had finally learned to keep those facts separate. "You look well," he said. "I am. Maine suits you. What do you need to discuss?" He glanced at his attorney. "Your acknowledgement language says I knowingly authorized unauthorized use of your seal. I cannot sign that. The emails show you wrote proceed after Celia explained what she planned to do. I believed she had verbal approval from you. Then why create a false address? I did not create it. You accepted it." His lawyer began to speak. Peter raised a hand. "If I sign your language, the city prosecutor will use it. That is not my decision. You could accept neutral wording. Neutral wording would make my reputation share a room with your deception. It will not." He looked at me for a long time. "When did you become so hard?" The old question would once have pierced me. It was designed to make boundaries look like a personality defect. The day I understood that softness without limits had made me useful to you. Peter lowered his eyes. "I never wanted to destroy you. I believe you. You wanted to use what I had and keep what you wanted. My destruction was simply a risk you accepted. That is not fair." Neither was listing my retirement account in a guarantee I had never seen. The screen held 6 silent faces. Peter leaned back. "Did you ever intend to marry me?" I asked. "Yes." "Why did you miss all 3 ceremonies?" His first answer began with Adam, the pipe, and the lender meeting. I waited without interrupting. Halfway through, he heard himself repeating the structure that had already failed. He stopped. "Because I thought you would reschedule," he said. "Why?" His eyes filled. "Because you always stayed." There it was. Not fear, not pressure. The central calculation beneath every emergency. "That was not a promise I made," I said. "It was a privilege you exhausted." Peter signed the acknowledgement that night. The broader settlement cost him most of his remaining interest in Braddock House. The city prosecutor later offered a resolution that required him to plead guilty to a misdemeanor false filing charge, pay restitution, complete community service, and comply with a 3-year prohibition on managing city-supported development projects. The lender resolved its civil claims without sending him to prison. Some people believed the consequence was too light. Others thought he had lost enough. I stopped measuring justice by the depth of Peter's suffering. The part that belonged to me was complete. My name was clear, my employees were protected, my costs were paid, and the truth existed in writing. Peter's first real apology arrived 11 months after I left Chicago. It came by regular mail, forwarded through Margot. There was no gift, no photograph, and no request to meet. Nora. For most of my life, I believed an apology was a way to reopen a negotiation. I said I was sorry so the other person would reassure me, return, or agree that my intentions mattered more than the harm. I am trying to write this without asking you to do anything for me. I lied about Adam because his relapse gave me cover. I used the pipe emergency the same way. I lied about Celia's collapse because by the third time I believed your forgiveness was guaranteed. I authorized the false documents because I wanted the loan more than I respected your judgment. I planned to place the guarantee before you after our marriage because I thought love and pressure would produce the answer I needed. You were right. I expected you to stay because you always had. I treated your loyalty as property. I am sorry. I do not expect forgiveness or a response. I will not contact you again unless you invite it. Peter. I read the letter twice. Then I put it in a drawer. I did not answer. The apology mattered, but it did not create an obligation. It did not return the years or turn deception into a misunderstanding. It gave Peter ownership of his choices. That was useful for his life, not a key to mine. Adam told me Peter was attending therapy and a support group for families affected by addiction. He had apologized to Elaine, too. She accepted the words and kept her distance. Dad asks about you sometimes, Adam said. What do you tell him? That you're well. Nothing more. Thank you. Adam reached 1 year sober. He became assistant manager at the bicycle shop and started leading Saturday repair classes. For his anniversary, I sent a set of professional tools. He called to complain that they were too expensive. Then use them for 10 years, I said. The cost will average out. Braddock House resumed construction under new leadership. Priya sent occasional photographs. The repaired parapet, the restored ballroom windows, the public path reopened during work. Peter's name was no longer on the project sign. Mine was not either. That felt right. In Maine, the harbor reading room reopened on a bright May afternoon. Children ran across the restored floor. Old glass scattered sunlight over shelves. The town manager asked me to cut the ribbon, but I handed the scissors to Samuel's youngest apprentice, the one who had cracked the first window edge and learned how to repair it. Why me? He asked. Because repair should be visible. After the ceremony, Samuel and I walked to the harbor. Our friendship had grown in undramatic increments. Coffee after site meetings, a concert with June and Malcolm, a Sunday spent helping Tess move apartments. He knew about Peter because I told him. He never asked for details I did not offer. Would you have dinner with me? He asked beside the ferry terminal. We have had dinner many times. I mean a dinner that admits I look forward to seeing you more than the windows. I laughed. That is a serious statement from a man who loves windows. I considered the wording for several months. He was not charming in Peter's way. There was no sunlight effect, no rush. Samuel's attention felt like a lamp switched on in a room we had already entered honestly. Yes, I said. I would like dinner. He arrived 10 minutes early. Samuel and I moved slowly. At first, I suspected calm because chaos had trained me to look for what calm concealed. When he canceled one dinner because his daughter needed help with a broken furnace, he called 3 hours before we were supposed to meet, explained exactly what had happened, and asked which alternate evening worked for me. I nearly cried at the ordinary respect of it. You know you are allowed to be disappointed, he said. I am. I am also grateful you told me. Both can be true. Adam had taught me that sentence. I smiled. Samuel was a widower. His wife, Margaret, had died from ovarian cancer 6 years earlier. He spoke of her with love that did not compete with me. On our 4th date, he showed me the garden she had designed behind his small house in Cape Elizabeth. On our 10th, he admitted he still talked to her when he could not find a tool. Does that frighten you? He asked. No. Secrets frighten me. Love with a history does not. We did not combine finances. We did not rush to share a home. He met Tess, and I met his daughter, Rachel, a high school music teacher with 2 children. June observed us for 6 months before declaring Samuel adequately unalarming, which was her highest form of approval. I remained in my apartment overlooking the bay. I sold the Lincoln Park brownstone to the family who had rented it. The sale closed without drama. Part of the proceeds went into retirement. Part funded a small grant program for women entering preservation trades. The remainder bought a weathered cottage outside Portland with enough room for books and a worktable. I did not buy it with Samuel. He helped repair the windows after I closed. At the Maine Heritage Trust, I developed an apprenticeship partnership with community colleges. Priya joined the advisory board from Chicago. Once a month, we spoke about business, buildings, and the strange courage required to delegate work one once believed no one else could do. Braddock opens next spring, she told me. The public walkway already has more visitors than before construction. And the ballroom? Your original plaster scheme survived. I allowed myself to be pleased. Peter's downfall was no longer the most interesting outcome of the story. Buildings stood. People worked. Adam remained sober. Celia, according to public records, joined a small hospitality company in another state after completing her settlement. Peter consulted privately and stayed out of city-supported projects as required. Life did not divide permanently into winners and ruins. It moved, unevenly, according to what each person built after the truth. On the second anniversary of the third courthouse day, I found my old pearl gray suit at the back of a closet. The dry cleaning tag was still attached. In the pocket was Maria Alvarez's stamped withdrawal form. Plans changed. I carried the form to the kitchen, where Samuel was repairing a loose drawer. "You kept that?" he asked. "Apparently. Do you want to throw it away?" I considered it. "No. I want to frame it." We hung it in my small home office, not as evidence of humiliation, but as the first document I signed in the life I chose. 3 months later, Samuel proposed in that room. There was no restaurant, photographer, or hidden family. He held a simple ring and said, "I love the life we have. I would be honored to marry you. But I do not need an answer today, and I will not treat your timing as a test." I looked at the withdrawal form on the wall. "Ask me again tomorrow," I said. He nodded. "I can do that." The next morning, he made coffee and asked again. I said yes. Samuel and I chose a courthouse wedding. June objected for exactly 30 seconds. "After everything, you want another government bench?" "I want the thing itself," I said. "Not a performance built to prove I am no longer afraid of it." We invited June and Malcolm, Tess, Rachel, the grandchildren, and Adam, who had reached 2 years sober. Priya flew in from Chicago. David sent a card addressed to Nora and the man sensible enough to arrive. The ceremony was scheduled for 10 on a Friday morning at Portland City Hall. I woke at 6 to rain against the cottage roof. For one panicked second, I was back in Chicago, counting hours and inventing explanations for a silent phone. Then a message appeared. "Samuel, awake. Suit pressed. Ring in pocket. I will be at City Hall at 9:15. No response needed. Just keeping my favorite architect informed. I laughed into the quiet room. At 9:10, Tess and I approached City Hall beneath one umbrella. Samuel stood under the stone portico, holding 2 cups of coffee. He was 5 minutes earlier than promised and 45 minutes earlier than required. "You are here," I said. I said I would be. There was no accusation in the answer, no awareness that he had completed a test. For him, arriving was not a grand gesture. It was the ordinary foundation beneath everything else. Adam hugged me and whispered, "This one has better timing. He has many qualities. Timing is a good start." We walked upstairs together. The marriage clerk was a cheerful man named Bernard who mispronounced Priya's last name, apologized, and began again. My mother's blue ribbon was wrapped around a small bouquet of hydrangeas from June's garden. When Bernard asked whether anyone had vows, Samuel looked at me. "Only if you want," he said. I had written mine on a card the night before. Unlike the vows in my handbag at Cook County, these were not promises to endure anything in order to prove love. "Samuel," I said, "I promise to tell you the truth before it becomes convenient, to hear your no without punishment, and to keep choosing a life in which neither of us has to disappear for the other to feel secure. Samuel's eyes filled. Nora, I promise to arrive honestly, he said. Not perfectly, not without delay or error. Honestly. I promise that when plans change, you will hear it from me, and when I am afraid, I will not turn fear into your obligation. Bernard pronounced us married at 10:14. No room went silent. No one collapsed. There was no last-minute revelation, no powerful stranger, no ruined enemy at the door. There was only rain against old windows, our family's clothes around us, and the warm pressure of Samuel's hand in mine. At lunch, Adam gave me a small wrapped box. Inside was a brass clock from the bicycle shop, polished until it shone. On the back, he had engraved 4 words, "Your time belongs to you." I held him for a long moment. Peter did not know about the wedding until afterward, Adam told him. According to Adam, Peter was quiet, then said he hoped I was happy. I was. Not because another man had finally arrived where Peter had failed to appear. Happiness had begun much earlier. On the bench when I withdrew the application, in Margot's office when I protected my name, on the highway when Chicago vanished, and in the first quiet morning that belonged only to me. Marriage was not the rescue at the end of the story. It was one good room in the life I had already rebuilt. That afternoon, Samuel and I walked along the harbor while our families returned to the cottage. The rain had stopped. Ferries crossed the bay, white against dark water. "Any regrets about the courthouse?" he asked. "One." He looked concerned. "I should have asked Bernard where he bought his tie," Samuel groaned. The tie had been covered in tiny lighthouses. We kept walking. For years, I believed love was measured by how long I could wait, how much I could carry, and how many broken promises I could understand. I had mistaken endurance for devotion and urgency for importance. I know better now. Love does not ask one person to vanish so the other can remain comfortable. It does not borrow your name, spend your trust, or make honesty the price of keeping peace. Love may be late sometimes. Life guarantees that. But real love calls. It explains. It makes room for disappointment and returns with the truth. Most of all, real love does not assume you will wait forever. It arrives, opens the door, and walks through beside you.